Two things. The first is that it's a big room, so please speak very, very loudly. The second is that we have all good lots of debates this weekend, so
Okay. Is anyone not ready? The contention is financialization. First, there are harms, expansive private market influence, drive accountability issues. Bubbles are inevitable. Legend and Devel 20 global financial actors have become dominant, turn housing into tradable debt. Private market solutions for last mortgage policies made financial actors powerful while expanding the debt economics significantly contributed to the finance bubble. Accountability is limited, and decoupling of mortgages from capital formation drives boom bust cycles and inflationary spirals. Cole 21, there's been a decoupling of mortgages prices from activity. Financialization account for why mortgages has not resulted in capital formation, lead to boosts, deeper house price bubbles, business cycle downturns are longer and deeper if fueled by burst mortgage and housing bubbles, cause lending behavior, lead inflated asset bubble, and bust zero temporary economic gains bubbles trigger permanent economic decline. Asset off 23 impact of negative returns on economic growth is stronger than positive. Preventing housing bubbles and reducing fluctuations is critical. Prices deviate from the long-run sustainable levels significantly impact macroeconomic stability. Bubbles have major consequences. Economic volatility, long-term disaster can result from house price volatility, which should result in a permanent decline in growth. And econ decline causes a great power war. Leo 18, the next crisis would hit the way for large-scale military conflict, await bankrupted governments, prolonged distress characterized by antipathy in foreign countries, fuel unrest, terrorism, and war. Populists make it at first worse. The next crisis will lead to large-scale military confrontation, global conflagration. Second is solvency. The United States ought to guarantee the right to housing that enables social planning of land use, which shifts from endless exploitation to democratic development. Bradley 23, the right to property must be a social right, separating use from exchange planning and provide land, prevent private capture, collective assignment of property rights and land value required to provide housing for all, including social housing, removal of tax breaks, rent caps and controls, and recognition of common property rights and land, planning, allocate the right to housing, land, and development are placed in the hands of democratically accountable organizations subject to a democratic decision-making vested in public ownership as an inalienable resource, not for-profit house building industry, deliver housing at the pace required without price fixing or land speculation, privileges use of land over exchange value, recognizing the soil as a common resource, and specific measures solve legend and Devel 20 for the right to housing. It's important that housing is located near opportunities of security and tenure. All these are human rights. Absence of human rights accountability. First, UNGP's obligation of states to protect against abuse by third parties, investigate, punish, and abuse through policies and governments to develop laws that include taxation, regulatory planning measures to reestablish housing as a human right, ensure that housing is proportionate to income, review policy-related foreclosure course, apply laws consistently with the right to housing, states monitor policies, provide their social housing or sole rental units, investment plans, privatization, and public-private partnerships are reviewed. Third, our benefits, lack of affordable housing, loss and slow growth, the plan saves. Foreman 18, a shortage of affordable housing costs $2 trillion each year, wages and productivity, prevented low income from moving to economic opportunities. Lack of affordable housing prevents earnings and causes slower growth. The GDP would have been 13.5% higher. Affordable housing options, $1.1 trillion increase in income overall helps economies increase jobs by leveraging funds to increase tax revenue. And first is depressed consumptive expenditure and skills drain. Anthony 22, higher housing costs and hamper growth. Household that spend large portion on housing costs have less residual income consumption, 60% of the GDP lower. Incomes depressed consumptive expenditure, stalling growth, and unaffordable housing is a negative impact on labor mobility, hindering relocating productive workers. And cumulative skill drain costs more than COVID. Myers Dental 21 in high productivity areas, people are priced out, many people working in less productive jobs than they could. Harder for productive businesses to hire because they're less able to combine their skills. These skills out without assistance. There's strong empirical evidence. Productivity rise by 2% or more with each doubling cost of regulation. Total cost of regulation induced problem may be enormous. If just easy loosening the rules, so real GDP would be 8.9% higher. Average income gain from emerging would be around 25%. 9% is how much the economy contracted in COVID. Second, the plan dilutes inflammatory policies. Labor 21, which inflation is the only policies that have increased upward pressure on prices. The answer to inflation is to build homes. Prices were rising faster than incomes in the past year. Has made shortage for worse, restrictive zoning laws and adequate funding and mass bankruptcy have constrained supply. Housing shortage will do all that inflation hawks clear. Failure to play demand side policy with reform will hold back growth, and slow growth causes extinction. Oppenheimer 21. Secular stagnation impact the way the states behave. Lower growth produce conflict, weaken institution, reduce capacity to confront warming and proliferate. Stagnation increase in political polarity, and nationalism policies will become polarized. Collaboration toxic, incentivize less investment, compromising growth. World with retrenchment, reduce interdependence. World War III, hotspots, Korea, SES, Taiwan, heightens escalation of conflicts, preventative wars. Great powers will find security dilemmas. CNC by new states heightened region transfer. American growth rates are in decline. States apply leverage capacity to which leadership is adjusting haphazardly. Decline in American lower growth would constitute a stress test. Though increased the conflict in the U.S., China, Russia. Renationalization in Japan, Korea, Germany, France, India, China, Iran, ISIS, use of nukes, collapse of arms control, and arms racing. The evidence is clear and economic numbers will accelerate retrenchment. Skip the warming scenario for now. Go to the method. Scenario planning catalyzes broader action in social relations and highlights systemic flaws in politics. Connolly 13. Rule experimentation can disrupt authority, habit, institutional regularity, sets the stage for larger scale action activity. Prompt you to experiment. Once you enter your professional life, you may rethink connections to persons to adjust your practices. Voting seems radically insufficient. Minor role experimentation can generate energy perceptions. How become ready to find forward connection with larger constituencies. Periodically critically politically movements exist from Arab Springs, new left feminist and gay rights movements, Occupy civil rights movement. There are ecological limits. If there are such discussions, they may expose more seams and cracks in the system are rendered visible by such experimental actions, and you still expect to value even if we lose consequentialism. Be modest, but calculating empirical uncertainty. There's decades of research on decision, expected value reasoning. Look at probability and value. If beer 1 in 100 will kill a rational, drink the beer. If we should look at probability to all sorts of views and look at how bad actions would be under all views, then we take the best compromise. And agreeing the plan is desirable doesn't require political hope. Only that tactical harm reduction is good. Smoker 14. Do we imagine a restructuring of relations as an all or nothing moment or horizon? What incentive do we get to strategize about overcoming obstacles we may become disinterested? And if we imagine a change in horizon vision, maybe as you so as long as it grounds us in struggle now. Today, organizations win victories, dismissing our efforts to not make one a revolutionary in its fatalism, and any improvement in the situation of people is dismissed as following the system. Nothing can measure up to utopian standards. The problem is not all or nothing thinking about change, and extinction is the eating process of closure that threatens both native and settlers alike. Wise 18 persistent claims also challenges closure. If the future for settler political life is becoming as uncertain as the future for indigenous life, then the dilemmas facing the Haida are the dilemmas facing settler society and a shared Haida. Settlers had a problematic indigenous political potentiality, spaces in which the Haida existence can continue for future generations, possibly overturn settler colonial anticipations and for erasure the nightmare future against which Haida people consider alternatives that threaten the settler society itself. If settler governments make itself the perpetual deferral of problems and the power of the future making to expose threatening on future workable alternatives challenges any settler future making emergent discourse about how things should be as they make plans struggles to seek to protect the planet itself. This constructive relationship towards more equitable and change must be material, but so can 19. This is planetary encampment has suffocated immense potential. Critique is necessary but secondary for that priority of practical theory as quickly as possible. Practicality can maintain critical impetus. Knowledge with the policy alternatives is politically enabling, forces away from instrumental perspectives towards a wider framework. The acid test for the successful alternatives empirically grounded work that focus should be practical possibility within a given context. Critical debates reach our emancipation but fail to develop tangible alternatives. Theory risks losing its ethical commitments, and knowledge may examine the cause and false rules of reaching out to the policy community. Critique should emphasize practical alternatives, lack of an explicit agenda limits their impact and values the existing order. This challenge should be how alternatives make an impact. I skipped warming and the last two method cards.
Good for cross?
Yeah.
Okay. What about the financialized marketplace? Does the app prevent or solve?
Yeah, so there are a few internal links to how the affirmative solves. There are specific measures as outlined in the alleged evidence. Specifically, the United States should be held criminally accountable for the actions by third-party corruption under their watch.
Okay,
the arguments that there are...
I understand the app's enforcement mechanism. I'm asking, how does that prevent the financialization of the housing market, given people obviously still own private property?
Yeah, so there are a few internal links to that. First, we've indicated that a major cause of financialization is risky practices by external third-party actors that are not liable. The argument the plan makes is that by criminalizing those approaches, third-party...
Does the plan eliminate kind of private property ownership, etc., that obviously is still financialization?
It does not completely eliminate it, no, but it eliminates the negative externalities of it.
Okay, let's talk about this skills drain scenario. What kind of skills are necessary?
Our argument is that if that housing is a major, obviously, concern when it comes to finding new jobs, the argument is that as a whole, we would calibrate the economy in a way that is the best, insofar as we would do for major cities. Our argument indicates that we would see a 9% increase in GDP growth if we freed up citywide innovation.
Could you still answer the question about skills? What kind of skills does the app say is necessary?
Like technological skills, like skills economy wide. There are obviously a multitude of skills that go into jobs, and the affirmative solves that.
The argument about boom and bust cycles, given that there have been inflationary spirals in the past, COVID, etc., why is now key?
Yeah, so our argument isn't that bubbles aren't forming, it's that bubbles are forming. Our argument is that inflationary spirals in the status quo are bad because of the fact that financialization is a bad structure. Our argument is that issues like COVID do exacerbate the issues, but the underlying root cause is of the fact that housing as an investment tool drives inflationary spirals that are doomed to pop.
Okay, what is a depression?
What?
You said that depressed consumptive expenditures. I'm asking, what does depressed mean?
Depressed consumptive expenditure means that people spend less money on productive areas of the economy because they're spending more on an inflated house.
Area of the economy?
For example, people could be investing into their children's education. People could be investing into
How do you know that is productive and other aspects of the economy are not?
The aspect of the economy that is not productive is housing, because we've indicated that it's decoupled from capital production. When housing prices rise, it does not necessarily indicate the house is better than it used to be.
That's not really what I'm asking. I'm just asking, how do you determine whether something is productive or not?
The app's made a claim that housing is not a productive sector.
How do you know what productivity is?
Because it's a question of capital production and prices. If prices are rising without
prices, that's how you define productivity.
Yeah, sure.
Great. Let's talk about the scenario planning arguments. What is scenario planning?
Yeah, so the argument is that the affirmative's imagination of political action even though it might not be like physically implemented into the real world, it's still a useful experimentation because it alters people's mindsets in a manner that makes them be like less ideologically dogmatic and allows them to influence politics in the real world when they do things like vote.
It's one. Order on cases, framing, then I guess just the advantages. Is everyone good? You good, Justin?
Yeah.
Debate is the sacrifice zone that habituates the public into exchanging disabled death for able life. The aspect is usual approach to reform stands the rising tide of eugenics, which secures a system that turns out profit from blood and guts. Mingus 22. We will not trade disabled death for able life. We will not look away from the masses. That's not a state machine committed to turn out profit. It is in the interest of power to keep people and care for you. You're not entitled to death in the name of capital. Disabled people are not disposable to be completely forgotten about. Independence and alters that our survival is bound together. If we not understand that we are together with the plan, we will not survive. Independence and understands we're bound together and care for one another. Independence cannot exist in scarcity, competition, comparison, or greed, foolishness, and abundance, and collective access. The ethos of work and productivity maintains the assumption that value is produced by labor, which assumes capacitation and ableness are default conditions of life. This both pathologizes the incapacity means that the app has failed to move beyond the administration of financializing property logic. Their call for increased efficiency is just another iteration of the neoliberal demand to work yourself to death. Zavatanos in 19, dependency and labor are often conceived in opposition, but disabled people can't do work both in the classical sense because it's hard work to be disabled, even if you've been barred from work, being bars are working the exercising right not to work. The disability and labor are not separate entities. We are told capital depends on labor. That dependency is not what's wrong. We are all dependent. The reason is the opposite. The disavowal of common dependency and the cost at which that disavowal is extracted. One problem is the construction of the need at last lack and care as labor workers for one thing only to condition life. All work is care work until we work beyond the production of value by labor. We won't really recognize labor because we will fail to recognize the dependency we share. I have a broad definition of disability to put out the level of life disability seen as akin to debt, whether it's obviously the grasp of life, the pressure to define disability can be untethered from capitalism. There's a sense that we need to draw a circle on who counts and who doesn't to make rights things legible within that system. Their approach to justifying housing accessibility through the lens of efficiency should be understood as an intervention into institutionalization, which inevitably repathologizes disability. Store 21 economic logic to disabled people's burdens on the families and the economy. Capitalist for institutionalization discourses. Sound institutionalization, civil economics is very good in discussion. Disabled people transition to institutional living resources expanded for assistance to independent rehabilitation and integrate with society by organizing training, starting new lifestyle care homes, structure regulated and required deliberate effort, perception, disabled people living independently burdened, for example, then to the society which will be depleted into interdependence presented inherently temporarily state of being something to be supported, portrayed as nature's fault. Independence was difficult to society's achievement problematized community-based living to disabled people were problem burdensome, solved by institutionalization. We will pull lines from the 1EC Anthony says, quote, unaffordable housing may hamper labor mobility, hindering workers from relocating to better paying jobs, inhibiting companies from the most productive workers for their operations. Second, 1EC Myers says, quote, that many people are working less productive jobs than they could. It's harder for highly productive businesses to hire them. They are less able to combine their skills. Many businesses end up leaving highly skilled staff. Third, 1EC Borman says, quote, the shortage of affordable housing costs wages and productivity. A lack of affordable housing access addition prevents families from increasing their earnings and causes slower growth. Four, the use of terms like depression and slow to define recessions attach negative terms to bodily conditions, which is violent and pathologizes disability. The impact is eugenics. Capitalist economics requires the purging of unproductive bodies to stabilize its regime of extraction. Rosenthal 21, modern eugenics demonstrates the ways in which the matrix of institution confinement, disability, oppression, elimination of social policies made a persistent feature of capitalist society insofar as the competitive accumulation of capitalism and the guiding imperative of capitalism. Disabled people represent a source of counter profitability. The labor power that disabled people possess is deemed undesirable via the productive economy. To be disabled is to be unable to competitively acquire a paying job within the prevailing conditions of capitalist wage labor. The solution to the problem of disability was mass institutionalization, sterilization, and social elimination, which claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands of asylums, hospital or state facilities, nursing homes, penal colonies, poorhouses, halfway homes, jails, and prisons. The forms change over the years, but the function is made warehousing degenerate populations with the growth of competitive wage labor embodies the mindset less profitably to conform excluded. The disability is the unnamed specter underlying the asked extinction scenarios. There's never been a time in this world where humanity was linked by universal possession of life. Voting latches onto the sacrificial and debilitating lineage of utilitarian ethics, which can only cohere itself from debilitating genocide. Kohlberg 18. The rational subject will extinguish unworthy lives of wave capacity the planet faces. As utilitarian logic becomes dominant, capacity becomes a decision will be made around the world of life. In this respect, utilitarianism has taken the most offensive position on disability, not an affect but a military offensive, a direct targeting of what has been seen as disabled today. Utilitarian arguments are especially offensive. They reveal the combated polemical bound sacrificial nature of civilization. Arguments for extinction assume the value of the person with an unquestioned right to the good life. Not everyone can live, and not all lives are viable. The survival lottery is already rival. There was ever time in the world when the world came even close to justice for all. The seemingly universal problem is a problem for a portion of humanity. This has logic of extinction. extinction. At its heart, the man of Western reason is not a species. He is not the only man to face extinction, for it is the end of this man who is threatened with the extinction of the world's end. What we witness is not genocide, but the end of the world. Cut the carded end of the world. The alternative is to deplatform the app. Speech acts are not just conduits for expression, but actions that coerce, demand, and persuade audiences towards their political investments. If we win that the app is part of an intellectual legacy that coalesces around eugenic economics, then you should end the reiteration of genocide ideologies, even if you're hesitant, because this is a fight we must win at all costs. Ladder 21. Speech is used to do far more than express ideas about reality. Speech acts attempts certain action demanding, promising, ordering, and persuading whether the content true or false is less relevant. Contemporary debates incorrectly treat speech simply as a tool for sharing opinions and feed bad ideas by exposure, argument, and persuasion. When groups, rather than speaking this public sphere, they're not only offering the thoughts up to the marketplace of ideas, it is both offensive and offensive to pretend as if we're in some sort of homogeneous and ideal speech situation. As long as we live under racial capitalism, some people's speech will always be freer than others, but the left should not avoid work collectively, reorganize any mere enemies, and seek to end the reiteration of genocide ideologies. Seek to deplatform not because we are attempting to develop a perfect set of rules. We deplatform because this is a fight we need to win. Our interpretation is that the 1AC should be evaluated as a rhetorical artifact. They don't get to weigh the implementation of the case. One plan focus restricts debate to a 10-second statement and leaves the rest of the app in question. They should be responsible for the ways that their knowledge is constructed and used, because that produces the best model for activism and ethics. Second, disembodied activism. D, their interpretation fails to hold debaters accountable for ableist practices within debate, which normalizes this activity to space of able normativity that pushes disabled debaters out through exclusive practices and models of argumentation. Accessibility outweighs its precondition to exist within the activity. And if we win that the model of debate pushes debaters out, you have an ethical obligation to reject it. Third, independently vote negative presumption. Fiat Lucy, the act does nothing, voting off would produce the advantage to discuss, but our arguments follow up to how we view policies debate. Four, we control uniqueness. People with disabilities are excluded from the policy process and academic research. Any framing argument about education and clash of fairness must first prioritize the epistemic unfairness that oversaturates conversations of disability and debate. Taylor 18 research that affords policy within education leaves that individuals with disabilities fails to consider ability, diversity, and well-being, safety, and status of disabled individuals can request comprehensive now research is conducted now individual with disabilities I've seen as epistemic agents must be included as active participants rather than passive objects of educational research. Active respect of their experiences to support the and research policy making. Acknowledging epistemic justice would be first step in addressing such a solution. Requires educational researchers to commit themselves to be that the research cannot take place when the notion of people with disabilities is not right. Laughable. 5, sacrifice. D, sacrificing disabled people for the pursuit of able normative conceptions of clash and fairness replicates eugenics within debate by viewing disabled people as a drain on the app's ability to extract education out of this activity, which is morally abhorrent. The framing extinction first is bad. 1, future dense logic is repugnant, would deny people abortions because there are any future dense psychology, violent model of ethics, and a reason to reject it. 2nd, pain and pleasure is a violent model historically used to justify genocide by portraying disabled people as unable to feel pain. 3rd, eugenics is exclusion. D, their logic of prioritizing saving the human race over the slow death imposed on disabled people has been used by scientists who claim to be the stewards of objective research and statistics to justify the literal elimination or forced sterilization of disabled people who are perceived as posing a threat to able-bodied society. 4, sacrifice. D, the future they preserve renders disabled lives out of time, which causes extinction in the interim. Rice et al. 17 futurity written theories that have promised human perfectability are deeply about notions of progress narratives that render disabled lives out of time. Close off the patriarchal implication what cuts progress and what humanity means negative implication for those who do something normative and stabilize disabled lives in temporality. You should put scenario planning on hold to overcorrect for disability. If we win that the model excludes certain debaters from the activity, then debating about the consequences of the plan is not relevant. If we win that if we win that their rhetoric in the first place was bad. Now the solvency, it does not solve one land. Schwartz 21 zoning the main obstacles to housing developers largely built for segregated because that's where the government could require land where what is imperative where it's critical to long-term expectancy and income purpose of eligible for artists estimated segregation. Second, capacity. Schwartz 21 the purpose for the government to build housing here by 3,000 local authorities must not have experience with construction agency operating under rules of processes, labor requirements, or default and more specific. They don't access specific measures. Their legend evidence about ICSR ratification, which has international verification measures. The plan only passes domestically, so it can't solve.
Okay. Are you good?
Yeah.
What does the all do to resolve tendency towards productivity?
We refuse your understanding of productivity, labor, etc. in debate. We have said that the app has used certain forms of rhetoric and certain understanding of the world that is violent towards disabled people. If we win that is true, you should deplatform the app.
So has productivity, are you making the claim that productivity has net harmed society?
We are making the claim that framing productivity through capital, labor, skills like the 1EC and 1EC cross-ticks have done is violent towards
So what happens if we don't have enough? What happens if we don't have enough workers to do things like
this
produce
is our
medicine
exact argument. You victim blame disabled people by being like, well, what about society? We need these resources, so you're the ones who are causing that death. Because whenever we focus on the problems that are facing disabled people, you're like, well, you're going to cause extinction.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So what do we do if we do not have enough labor to do things like produce medicines for people who
Sure, so
are
our
on critical
alternative
need?
reframes labor around care work. We recognize that community and the way that we interact with each other is not only defined through capital or GDP or our production of those things as such, but rather with the way that we relate to each other for a common goal. And focusing on that rather than capital, GDP, productivity, and economic conceptions of rationality.
What's the incentive for people to
The incentive is that the
do
first card that we read in the 1 and C literally says that our interdependence is bound up in each other. We cannot survive without each other. We cannot sacrifice disabled people.
That seems like a really hopeful goal when you've made the claim that society wants to exclude disabled people. But let's talk about.
We've said that the app's understanding of productivity and capital excludes and sacrifices disabled people.
So you're saying that
you should
people,
not do that.
So you're saying that society, there's a structure of society that wants to exclude disabled people.
We have not presented a theory of ontology or structuralism,
wait.
which is why the 1 year will not be responsive to this case.
You've made the claim that there is a society that's built around productivity that excludes disabled people, yet you also think that people will also just turn around and spend their entire lives helping.
We've made a lot of framing arguments in the context of debate. We have said that debate and speech acts are not neutral expressions of content, but rather internalize certain understandings of the world that are violent. If we win that the app forwards an understanding of the world that literally causes people to go out and eliminate disabled people, then you should just vote neg immediately. This is not about
what
the
our
content
model
of the
does?
app. That is literally what your model does, yes.
What about a model? What about a model of the world in which people aren't conducting any productive labor and people
this is not about a model
medicine?
of the world. This is not about the consequences of the
Okay,
plan.
so
this is about the 1AC and the investments we made into rhetoric.
The negative has a link to. So does the is the alternative occur on a physical plane?
This case.
Does the alternative occur on a physical plane or does it occur on like a discursive plane?
What is a physical plane? Like
because you made the argument that the critique is a critique about wait, can I?
Sure.
You've made the claim that the critique is a critique about representations, not physical consequences. So is the alt like discursive, like we talk about it, or is the alt physical in the real world? Because you can't have it both ways.
It's not about what we should do. It's about what you have done that is violent towards disabled people and why you should be rejected.
I'm asking about the alt. Is the alt a physical?
The alt is literally deplatform the app. The 1AC was eugenicist, rejected.
Gotcha. Okay, I'll start prep now. And you cut the solvency. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that was 340 used. I have 120 left. Let me type that. Alright, the order's going to be case, then the critique, and the critique will be where I justify util, like answer the 1 and 2 util arguments.
Give me 1 second.
So the case will only be advantage solvency.
And are you gonna do the sort of framing stuff first on the K or the K profit?
I'm gonna start with framing.
Okay.
Yeah, I sent it.
Don't worry, I've been diligent of being this piece wrong.
Thank you.
I'm checking in well. Just make sure.
That's what I put on Twitter.
But did I also ever give the code?
Let's just
Let's
do it. Okay. Is anyone not ready? Housing bubbles form when prices are decoupled from capital production. Investors drive prices up without creating any new value, creating asset bubbles that are exacerbated by lack of private sector accountability and lending and shady investments. Bubbles pop, launching a permanent decline bigger than 08. That's asset off. Economic decline outweighs alters voters. Psychological preferences towards intervention, fueling terrorism and nuclear war. Populists feel political avoid dooming structural resilience. Group their solvency arguments. They assume the affirmative builds new houses. That's not what the AF does. The plan solves versus accountability. Sketchy practices are criminalized and investigated under UNGPs. Taxing and other regulatory schemes under human rights allow specific measures against financialization. Second is decoupling plan plus private plans and to review for private sector actions, realigning prices with capital production and punishing financialization under human rights violations. They say it's extra topical. Read the legend evidence. The arguments that human rights violations are a way in which companies can be held culpable through litigation. The critique. Framework. Let me weigh the case against a competitive alternative, and that means links based on discourse and epistemology need to be contextualized to the desirability of the plan. Anything else is arbitrary, unresolutional, and so what you see that kills class and fairness, which turns advocacy skills and outweighs. But even if we lose framework, let us weigh the case. One is toxical harm reduction. Ignoring materialism is bad because it ignores the material conditions of the status quo that locks individuals into homelessness. The all devolves into fatalistic ivory tower theorizing that ignores a step in the right direction, which is the Smucker evidence. Second is scenario planning, the iterative process of debating and clash affects decision making in the future. Agnostic deliberation encourages reorientation that spill up in the future, but bracketing out deliberation locks in the current system, which is the Connolly. First, we'll do whether or not we can weigh the case, then util. First, they say constriction and disembodied activism decided. That's not us, since we allow weighing discourse. Our argument isn't that only consequences matter, but rather the consequences of the discourse should be weighed against each other. Disability exclusion is inevitable. The argument, fairness rhetoric from speech times is inevitable, which proves that fairness is not something that's intrinsically bad, but rather something that both debaters have to abide by, which is that any disadvantages are inherently non-unique. They say performance and fiat illusory. If it ignores consequences, it empirically doesn't spill up. Critiquing policies without a materialistic defense fails to develop alternatives that spill up, which is the Visoka evidence, which proves that all fails. There's no one argument that influences subjectivity. Just because Anj or I read China war good and around does not mean that we think China war is good. Fiat might be illusory, but scenario planning spills was dropped, and fairness outweighs the policy process argument. Legal reforms are good. The alternative is in unlimited deference to discriminatory state statutes. Waterstone, 14 advocates for disability have a statutory scheme. Statutes go beyond constitutional protection because they extend deep into the accommodation sphere. Disability law should advance the rights of people with disabilities. Working around the framework carries costs. The ADA has already been challenged. Such a tax will intensify not gaining ground is tantamount to losing it and will undermine strategy. The theorizing is happening and disabilities is diminished by not being part of it. Framing rights and constitutional ways. The sacrifice argument is paternalistic to say that requesting fair clash is sacrificing disabled people. That's obviously not the same thing, and you shouldn't equate them. They say the exclusion argument. That's not our framework. That was above. We don't exclude discursive analysis. We just say that it should be incorporated along with the material analysis. Now, extinction outweighs stuff. First, they say future gens logic. We aren't going for future generations argument. Extinction is extremely bad for individuals in the status quo, which is the only argument we're going for. The pain and pleasure is a violent model argument. Not only have we not justified pain and pleasure in the AF, our only claim is about body count, which includes disabled people. They say eugenesis exclusion. It's not a question of logic. That's a fallacy of association. It's about imminent impacts that will kill everyone because there is a conceded advantage. The sacrifice is sad. There's no one cause of extinction. We think a holistic weighing mechanism is good. The plan solves approximate cause, which we'll do later. They say you should put scenario planning on hold to overcorrect for disability. That's an illogical argument. Is that scenario planning is an intrinsic part of the affirmative, perm do the affirmative, and then the alternative. Nuclear conflict outweighs the world before and after. One is not the same. Nuclear was the definition of mass genocide. Radiation would kill for generations, and lack of healthcare disproportionately kills disabled people. For closing the alternative because survival is a prerequisite. Extinction outweighs because it's irreversible. Uncertainty means default affirmative. Future making is critical, which is the McCaskill evidence. Framing issue. It's not a question of whether the affirmative increases or decreases productivity. It's a question of what the alternative endorses. Not having the state intervene into the market lets the free market run free, which is even worse. There's no root cause of nukes or war. The affirmative solves the proximate cause. There is is not one explanation for what a disability driver, whatever the critique says, is the root cause of war. Only the affirmative resolves the proximate cause of war, which is economic decline. Any other explanation is reductionist. Even if there is a link, that does not mean it's the only causal relevant link, which is that they don't solve all impacts. There would be a massive die-off from the alternative. Carlson 16. There are many reasons to be skeptical of this localist discourse. First, different locations have different endowments. Inefficient production would require higher inputs of labor, energy, and raw materials, but also leave less room for nature. Agricultural production will be pushed into landscapes of increasingly lower productivity. The unthinking trade is essentially the really thing. Unthinking water civilization. Human welfare actually depends on economies of scale, specialization, and exchange. Simply suffices to consider how little most individuals know farming to realize what an enormous loss of productivity and knowledge would follow. These tasks were to be more broadly shared within local communities. Ecological tools that will follow. Billions go out into nature in search for food is unfathomable. Scholars show the little appreciation for the enormous gains in welfare, not to mention the progress in science and technology, which have made it possible thanks to specialization.
I'll start that. That's the K then case. So the K is like the framework stuff, then all of like the perms and all the other arguments they made, and then util stuff, and then maybe the case. That's it.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, so it's like where framework was, then the perms and all the other arguments to the K, then the like util stuff, and then the case. No, it's empty. Yeah. No, there's not a long version. The framework's kind of long. Okay, is everyone good? Okay. They have dropped our theory of eugenics, which is why they cannot win this debate. Capitalism requires the purging of disabled bodies who are seen as antithetical to economic system, productivity, efficiency, and labor to cohere a society built around maximum efficiency and GDP. The one who sees investment into these economic logics are not neutral, but relegate disability to his own sacrifice, which creates the conditions for exclusion, genocide, and systematic elimination through eugenics, which characterizes a state of slow death that coheres modernity itself. They have dropped this thesis claim, which means that any investment into the affirmative or the consumption of productivity, etc., to define the app causes serial policy failure and will always exclude disabled people who it is antithetical to the society that the app tries to uphold, which outweighs framework. Proper extend our interpretation to evaluate the one you see not as a policy, but as a rhetorical artifact, which means that you should only evaluate arguments based on the app's rhetoric and the way that they frame their scenarios before evaluating the concept of the plan. It does not foreclose their ability to engage, rather forcing you to justify the way that you have invested into certain conceptions before being able to weigh the consequences of those conceptions in the first place. You should put fairness and clash on hold if you win a link, if you win that the app is based on eugenics and the sacrifice of disabled lives. You cannot ethically vote for them because they've dropped that your role is first and foremost to be an educator, not a policymaker. None of the policies we debate about spillover outside of this round, which is an argument that the 1 year themselves made because we change every 2 months, and fiat is illusory, which is that the individual consequences of the policies we advocate for are relevant in the long term, but how we advocate for them, our conceptions of the world, our understanding of labor, productivity, etc., does get internalized in our minds and that gets exported into the real world in the way that we interact with disabled people. Independently, serial policy failure implicates every single one argument about activism and skills that the TRIR will go for. Their epistemology influences the consequences of the plan. Justifying the plan through notions of productivity and statistical benefits to the nation means that the app's housing policy or whatever activism that they create in the real world will inevitably just institutionalize disabled people or view them as antithetical to their society, which is all of our thesis level arguments that are dropped. The advocacy skills. One, we have impaterned their conception of skills. They cannot go for this argument when they have dropped our thesis that debate is a sacrifice zone. We are impatterning the skills that they claim to generate. The app's model expects disabled debaters to do the labor to test the app and allow them to create the skills that they need so that they can go out and become lawyers. And when they refuse, the app victim blames them by saying that they're preventing our ability to generate skills or learn about activism. If the app sacrifices disabled people in their movement when the stakes are low, i.e. in a debate round, you should assume that they will get sacrificed when the stakes are high outside in the real world. And independently, second, their argument about harm reduction is bad because we win that the app excludes disabled people out of their activist movements. So that was all of our serial policy failure arguments because the way that the app understands economics and housing plays out in their house movement in the real world. They say fatalism, it's not fatalism. We made an argument about how speech affects us all proximately, which is a dropped 1C Lester evidence. Speech acts are not neutral expressions of content like the 1C has assumed in the 1ER, but rather persuade audiences to understand a certain understanding of the world. And the way that the app deploys conceptions of efficiency and wage labor is not neutral, but actively affirms eugenics. And they've also dropped that accessibility outweighs their interpretation, literally pushes disabled debaters out because it means that we always focus on far off threats. And even if they win that extinction is an actual threat, that we should consider our argument is that we should consider the way that they actually treat disabled debaters first, and that concerns that actually affect our lives proximally and the way that we internalize that must come first. They say discourse should be weighed wrong because under their interpretation whenever we criticize them for being racist or being ableist, they will always say extinction outweighs, which is that we never actually get our discussions, which is that you should not allow them to weigh the case at all because it always forecloses our ability to engage in these discussions. Fairness, inevitable argument is not that fairness is bad, but just that you should not evaluate fairness over everything else. Prioritizing an objectively fair round is exactly what justifies disabled debaters being denied accommodations because it's viewed as an unfair advantage, or when debaters actively ignore requests to slow down for debaters with cognitive disabilities, which is why structural unfairness must come first. Disabled debaters are already beginning from a position behind able-bodied debaters because of our assumptions within debate, which is all of our arguments above. They say it does not spill up. They've dropped that it's not about spillover, but the way that our speech acts actually get internalized and then exported into the real world. Independently, I'll extend the tailored evidence here. Epistemic unfairness outweighs procedural unfairness and skills. The process of political discussion and academic research excludes debaters with cognitive disabilities who are labeled as deviant and neurodivergent. That means that you should prioritize disabled inclusion prior to any other impact to the model of debate. Boils down to add disabled people and stir, which fails to recognize the unique positionality of disabled people in the context of a debate round that makes claims to procedural fairness, clash, etc., equivalent to deny accommodations, which was above. Their next argument about legal processing being good is just not responsive at all to our criticism. We have not said the political processes are good because we have not presented a theory of ontology, which is why I tried to help you in 1AC cross-link. This is just not responsive. Our argument is that the opposite invested into a conception of eugenics, which is every dropped 1AC line that we read you in the 1AC, every argument, every time that they said depression, or every time that they said slow growth, or every time that they said that we need to define productivity in terms of labor, wages, GDP, like they did throughout 1AC cross-links, is exactly what we are criticizing, which is it's not about political processes, it's about rejecting their investments in eugenics, and now they say it's more sacrificial because we exclude discourse, because I'm not even sure what that argument was, though. Permutation proper. Permutation to do the app, and the old makes no sense because the alternative is to deplatform the app. The Western evidence makes an argument about how speech acts get internalized and then exported into the real world, which is not only refusing the objective disability is key. Nuclear warfare closes the alt. It's not relevant. This is our victim blaming DA, because whenever we point out that the app was ableist, they're like, but you're going to cause extinction by pointing this out and focusing on it, which is exactly what you should do. You should refuse this move to neutrality every time the 1 or 2 AR will never be like their model excludes activism that is necessary to actually help disabled people. That is the exact way that when disabled people bring up critiques of the 1AC or say that you are ableist, you're like, well, whatever, but how do we move on for that, or how do we help in the real way? They say that the app does not solve proximate causes or that it drives the economic decline. This is not our argument. They have dropped that interdependence requires that we are all bound up in each other, which means that we do have an extinction impact from the first 1AC evidence, because it says that the only way that we can move on to actually save society is by recognizing that everyone matters equally, and which is not the utilitarianism argument, because they sacrifice people. They say that the alt causes massive die-offs. This is literally our victim blaming DA. The alt is to reject the app speech, and they say that causes die-offs, which is necessarily bad, and assumes disabled debaters the extinction first argument. Extinction first should disgust you. This is exactly what we mean by victim blaming DA. Debate equips people to develop various rationales that ultimately just rationalize eugenics for different reasons. The one ear arguments that they said here kind of accuses us for bringing up critiques of the 1AC in favor of burdening the collective. So when we say that the app reproduces eugenics, they're like, stop free riding on other kinds of movements because you're going to cause extinction. They say that it's about body count. This is our argument because disabled people are not promised the same temporal lifespans as normal people, which means that the concept of universally granting access to everyone is not ever possible, which is the exact critique of extinction that we made, which is that you should evaluate disabled lives on a prior level because they're always constantly written out of these spaces in the first place because of our theory of eugenics. This debate boils down to framework. They do not get to weigh the case at all because our entire argument is that their understanding of efficiency, productivity, etc. creates worse activist movements for disabled people and pushes disabled debaters out of the activity. They dropped accessibility outweighs fairness and clash, which is if we win that thesis claim about eugenics, because they've just straight up dropped it. They dropped everyone I see line.
Okay. 120 of prep starting now. Okay. So I'll wait. Okay. The order is just gonna be the K.
Starting in more specific.
It's gonna start on, I guess framework.
Or
Like, yeah, just like an explanation.
C.
Is anyone not ready?
Hold on.
Okay.
The 2-R was great on grandstanding for why debate sucks. If there's a model in which the affirmative gets to weigh the case, we will concede their framework. This debate is a question of the affirmative's logic and discourse. The part that 2-R forgot to extend was a defense of why productivity is bad for disabled people. The 2-R asserts large, sweeping claims like productivity is bad because disabled people can't be productive, or productivity is bad because disabled people can't work. These are all sweeping claims that the 2-R has made. The 1AR impact turned that and said that productivity is good for disabled people. Winning this is a defense of our exported representation. It means that the productive and labor-intensive society that we export into the real world is great, and that's what the link is about. Before you vote on this, we'll explain to you first is policy reform. Productivity is what allows disabled activists to be productively fighting within the political realm, assuming no political people can be productive or engage in policy research because of the fact that they have conditions is bad, because we've already seen material progress from things like the ADA, etc., which is the Waterstone evidence coming out of the 1AR. Advocates for disability have done things like implemented constitutional reforms and extended deep into accommodation spheres. The second argument, which was the most damning concession, is the Carlson 16 evidence. A localist discourse and a discourse that does not focus on skills-based rhetoric is bad. Lower productivity will kill disabled people. Our argument is that the critique actively ignores enormous gains in welfare, progress in science and technology, which have actively helped disabled people. Skills have prevented things like low-scale agriculture, which would have led to mass-scale food shortages. It leads to a reduced ecological toll on the world, which reduces things like climate change and warming, that increase things like healthcare costs for disabled people and create more disabilities. The argument, create more material harms. The argument the 1AR has made is the Carlson evidence is that there would be massive die-offs if society were to revert from a skills-oriented society into a less materialistic and a focusing on the local society. Our Carlson evidence specifically talks about localist modes of production being insufficient to resolve enormous gains in welfare and would cause massive loss of human life from modern civilization, but only the affirmative is able to solve by exporting skills into the real world that allow for things like a productive society and a productive economy and society. We aren't killing disabled people. We are doing things like helping them by allowing the efficient modes of innovation that are able to do things like help healthcare or help science and technology, which are able to help them engage within a political society. Now here's the framing issue. The 2NR said that the 2NR has not made a reason for why a skills and productive society have harmed disabled people. We've impact turned a link. The link that the 2NR extended was to the affirmative's rhetoric, but you should think of that there was an impact to this link. They've made arguments about why capitalism necessitates the exclusion of disabled people. However, this would be multiply exacerbated under the alternative, and massively exacerbated by the negative world. Only the affirmative discourse is able to sustain some level of production that would result in advances that are able to help disabled people. Anything else would lead to even worse suffering by leading to massive die-off. Second is that there's no intrinsic part of capitalism that necessitates the exclusion of disabled people, which is the Waterstone evidence. Their own 2NR says that there is no exclusion of disabled people that is intrinsic, and they don't make a structural claim about society. We've made arguments about how discriminatory statutes are able to be reverted and how advocates for disability are able to make reforms, which is the argument we did above, which is the question you should be asking yourself is whether there is an impact to the link. Great debate.